Wellness is on the minds of consumers across all key demographics, and new research from Circana reveals some major shifts in how shoppers view the topic. Today, consumers are taking a more holistic approach to wellness, which encompasses physical, mental, emotional, and functional needs. And this evolution is reshaping purchase decisions across all age groups, challenging retailers to adapt their strategies to meet distinct generational priorities. Welcome to Store Brands Spotlight. I'm Greg Sleater, Executive Editor of Store Brands. Joining us today is a good friend of Store Brands, Sally Lyons Wyatt, Global Executive Vice President and Chief Advisor at Circana. We'll take a deep dive into Circana's new data on the consumer mindset around wellness and discuss how retailers need to adapt to meet current day needs. Sally, welcome to the podcast.
Greg, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
And we are always excited to have you and to talk with you. And obviously, wellness is such a major topic nowadays. And as this report shows, there is an evolution in the consumer mindset and how it looks for products or looks for ways to improve its wellness. And we'll get into a lot of that as we go on. Sally, the research mentions that wellness is no longer just about calories or physical health, but also the mental and emotional needs that people have. Within the data, what indicators showed that consumers are now shopping for, if you will, stress relief as much as they are nutrition?
You know, it's an interesting question. The data actually shows a clear broadening of what health means in the shopping cart. So beyond traditional nutrition markers like calories and protein, we're seeing an increased engagement from consumers with products positioned around mood, around calm or sleep, mental clarity. This really includes the growth of functional claims tied to stress support, adaptogens, magnesium, CBD adjacent, as we've seen that, even THC, beverages focused on relaxation or focus. But importantly, these products aren't really replacing nutrition. They're just coexisting with it. And that's suggesting that consumers are indeed addressing emotional and mental well-being as an equally kind of essential need, not a secondary one. And there's a big conversation around food as medicine. And I think that that's what this really is embracing.
Health-minded consumers now account for about 40% of all food and beverage sales. Is this a permanent structural change in the market, or are we seeing more of maybe what is a temporary response to the post-pandemic world?
Based on everything we've seen, it looks far more structural than cyclical. What the pandemic did was it taught all of us that life is precious, and it accelerated health awareness. And so what's notable is that these behaviors have persisted even with the immediate health fears that receded. And also, consumers aren't really reverting to pre-pandemic habits. Instead, their health considerations are now really embedded into everyday decision-making that suggests a long-term recalibration of value, where food and beverage are viewed as tools for resilience, prevention, quality of life, not just sustenance. And I also think we now have both ends of the spectrum living differently. What I mean by that is older consumers are living longer. Younger consumers are seeing older generations more than they did in the past, and they can engage more with social and digital media. And I can tell you just from my own kids, I had my father-in-law live with us for 12 years, and they saw his health continuing to decline. They now embrace with their lives at a very young age differently than they would have if we hadn't have gone through that seismic shift in kind of that consumer aptitude around health. And I just see the younger generations actually outpacing some of the older generations and trying to embrace longevity differently.
That's interesting, Sally. Is there any historical data that shows, Gen Z, I guess we'll focus on them for the moment, and maybe even the millennials that are earlier in life eating healthier and being healthier than maybe the Gen Xers and the boomers did in that same age group?
I wish I had that. That would be great. I can only talk anecdotally. We did not have all the same assortment and options that are available today back 10, 20 years ago. And so I think it's been twofold. there's a consumer who's willing to invest in themselves. That's what the seismic shift of 2020 was and 21. But also, there's more knowledge around the foods we need to optimize our health. And so those are more available and accessible than they were before. Not for all, but definitely we've seen that. So um, I don't have any data to benchmark. I wish I did, but I can tell you there's always been a healthy subset of any generation, people that have always wanted to eat healthier. Maybe they leaned into organic, maybe they leaned in all natural. So there's always been that. But to the broad extent that we're seeing it now, I think it is unprecedented.
Right. It's interesting because I mean, I think back to when I was 25, it really wasn't a concern for me. I ate what I wanted to eat and didn't think about it. And then when I turned 45, it was like, maybe I should go to the doctor for a yearly physical. So I think there are younger groups now doing those kinds of things, and it's more prevalent in their mindset than there was for my generation. It's interesting.
I agree.
So we have this desire for holistic wellness, and then there's the reality of convenience and indulgence that's still there among all of us, particularly in the food service sector. Um, how do consumers balance these two as they kind of try to live a healthier lifestyle?
Well, first of all, you used the right word. I think balance is the right word. And what we're seeing is a few things. One is that a strong demand for products that deliver comfort and enjoyment and convenience that are also functional and or have a better for you halo. And then for pure indulgence, so consider that more permissible indulgence, if you will, or even healthier products. But pure indulgence, it's all about portion and or how much you might eat at a certain time, or how often you might eat at a certain time. So I think that's the key, is that balance is critical. People aren't giving up on indulgence. That's so important for everyone to know. We will all want to indulge. I don't care who we are, it's human nature. And so we may want that scoop of ice cream, but maybe it's a scoop versus three. Maybe it's once a week versus 5 days a week, right? So that is something that I have been trying to inform industries and organizations, is that we will always have indulgence in the mindset and the choices that consumers make. But I do think it's that balance that's so critically important, and what might allow consumers to get what they want more conveniently and to align to the needs of their personal goals.
Sally, the Circana report also noted this split between preventative care for older generations and functional convenience for younger ones, which I don't think is surprising, but I think the challenge is, how do retailers ensure that they're reaching both groups with the products they need?
That generational split, to your point, is not surprising, but it is actionable. So retailers can serve both groups by layering solutions rather than segmenting stores. They can provide preventive care to shoppers and through education. Their pharmacists, even while younger consumers gravitate towards portability, immediacy, and clear benefit statements. So the opportunity is to merchandise wellness in multiple entry points. So whether that's pharmacy adjacent, the grab and go in the, near the deli or near the meat area, and then digitally inform as well, so that each generation encounters it in a way that feels very intuitive and kind of personalized to them.
You mentioned deli, and it's interesting because I think when we have these discussions around, I don't want to call it a seismic change, but a change in how people are shopping, especially when you have new generations now, with money in their pockets and a certain different mentality in what they want. Um, to see retailers not just have to put things in one aisle, but realize that they can spread this around the store, and obviously the digital component of education, and even putting a broader mix on your e-commerce platforms. But I think that thought process of just don't have a wellness aisle, this stuff can be sprinkled around the store, on end caps, or at the front end with registers. So I think it forces retailers to think differently how they merchandise these products as well.
I love that. And I would tell you that also, with agentic commerce on the rise, then those product description pages are so critically important that you don't. I agree 100% with when someone actually walks into the store, then have health and well-being permeating across. 100% agree. For those that are also opting in to leverage agentic commerce, then as they put in a word, maybe they are looking for, I mean, I'm not going to go with the usual of higher protein. So let's go with something different. Like they're going to search for, I'm looking for some microbiome. So like, what are products that are going to have that? It's a little new and that's going to be, but what does that mean? Maybe I want to have better digestive health. All right. So then all the things that might have to do with digestive health, that includes oral care, that includes the things that are for the tummy. Like there's all sorts of things that go into that. That should not be based on one aisle or one category. It's across the store solutions that can help with digestive health.
You mentioned earlier, people are obviously living longer and getting older, and there's more of that overlap between younger and older. And baby boomers is that group that comes to mind. We talk about and we study a retail industry that is obsessed with new and tomorrow. With that obsession, are they at risk of alienating a generation in the baby boomers that still has pretty good spending power?
If retailers are over focusing on, let's call it Gen Z, then there is a real risk because baby boomers still drive a disproportionate share of dollars, especially in the health related categories. And an industry obsession in what you called new can unintentionally deprioritize the shoppers who trust and value the retailer and their trust mark and what they're driving. So the smartest retailers out there are finding ways to balance innovation with reassurance and also bringing boomers along on their wellness journey rather than signaling health innovation that's focused on the young. I think we keep talking balance, but I think that's kind of the key to this.
So let's bounce back to the younger generations for a second. And we think about Gen Z and millennials and how they consume information through digital channels, e-commerce channels, things like that. What does this mean for the traditional brick and mortar retailers when it comes to talking about health and wellness? Do they need to use their digital storefronts more? And how do they kind of, maintain their traditional setup in store while more younger consumers are turning to the digital outlets for their information and to buy products?
Yeah. So, Greg, digital clearly is winning, and discovery is the biggest area, education as well as community. So, those community forums socially have become a big deal and a differentiator for companies that will go after those social communities. But this is very particularly true for a Gen Z and millennial. But that doesn't mean that physical retail is losing relevance. It just means the role must evolve. And I think this is the biggest opportunity for retailers is more around how to win in brick and mortar. And that's going to be, how can you disrupt the algorithms? How can you disrupt that discovery to want to go in? And maybe that means that experience is around simplifying the choices, reducing the overwhelm feeling that when you walk into a store and can I find it? Look, I've actually talked to pharmacists and doctors who tell me they have become the validators of social and viral messaging. So I did it myself. I said, hey, to my dentist, hey, I read about this. What do you think? And he's like, if I told you how many people are coming in now, and that's my role. But that is where retailers can be that place where consumers come in to find the truth. What is it that I need to be doing when I have this condition or I'm trying to prevent this or whatever it might be? Retailers can assist consumers with their nutritionists, their dietitians, their pharmacists. They can do it through curated assortment, clear benefit signage. They can also provide in-store services and even that omni-channel integration. So we know that consumers won't automatically just do all their shopping brick and mortar unless they have that ability to do so. So how can they make that omni-channel integration one that connects the online inspiration to the in-store engagement and experience? Like that's going to be the true testament on how that human interaction wins over the bot to bot interaction, if you will.
And when you think about, you're in a store and you ask that expert for their insight and their opinion, you're physically in the store. It surprises me. Maybe they're doing it and I just don't see it on the social media platforms that I'm on. But you would think retailers like the drug chains that have this expertise, they'd be somehow using that expertise to educate people because there is so much misinformation out there, or people just trying to sell stuff so they'll tell you anything. But to tap into that expertise in the store, whether it be a pharmacist, a nutritionist, I'm surprised we don't see more of that where these retailers are using that expertise in house to better educate people while also, building their brand equity and thought leadership.
I do see, I think there's a double-edged sword to this. So let me say that I do see some retailers, but they stay within their ecosystem. There is obviously risk of being out there and saying something and somebody maybe they action, but yet they didn't that really wasn't for them. So there is a risk at it getting out there and debunking something with the wrong audience, if that makes sense. Like that could be a risk. So I'm sure that there is somebody in corporate that's like, we can do these things, we can't do these things, and trying to keep people from getting too far affray. But the in-store vehicles, to your point, and the levers that we can pull to get to consumers, whether it's digital or socially, and start giving markers and ideas to those individuals based on what we know about them. All these loyalty programs, we know a lot. It doesn't mean that they've opted in, although they can, to share their health records. Most of people are still kind of a little leery on that. But think about it. We know a lot about the shoppers based on what they buy through these loyalty programs. So there is an opportunity, and I think some retailers do it better than others, to use those programs to provide education, to provide idea generation, to give a different experience. So I do think some of that is happening, but I also think going out there into the broader ecosystem does provide a little bit of risk, but it has to be done the right way in
Right.
order to avoid that.
Yeah, absolutely. All I kept thinking in my head as you're saying that is the lawyers are involved. That was the only thought I had in my head. So
That's probably true.
yeah, run it past, it has to run past legal first. So it was the first thing I thought. You mentioned brick and mortars not overwhelming people when they're in stores with too much selection. Um, so this brings us to functional beverages. And when I walk into a store and I see the beverage lineup in stores, grocery, mass merchants, what have you, I'm overwhelmed. It's just so much out there. But there's a lot out there. Personal hydration, this is something that people are consuming more. I think this has gone beyond trend, and now this is a deeper shift in how consumers view these beverages as liquid supplements, right?
Well said. Yes. We're way more than a trend now. And the functional beverages are those liquid supplements, as you talk about, their meals, their medicine, their meaningful moments. And we've seen the beverage landscape transform. And it's not just about that, it's about energy and recovery and immunity and mood and performance. And, you said something about it's overwhelming when you walk in. 100% agree with that. What I do love is a lot of now the beverages are putting in very bold, like what is the main function of that beverage so that like, okay, I'm looking for protein. Well, which beverages are high in protein because that is fully on the front and the number of grams very much highlighted. The same thing goes for beverages that might be around immunity or mood. We're seeing those markers be cued a bit stronger and bolder because it is confusing. And social media might help accelerate the adoption and the education, but the underlying shift really reflects how consumers want solutions that are easy, daily, integrated into whatever their day is, and not necessarily pill-based or clinical per se.
As the wellness lifestyle grows, the one thing that we're continuing to see is that, especially with healthy eating, it's not a one size fits all. And it seems like this is more fragmented than it's ever been. I think that presents a real challenge to retailers. So, from your expertise, What can the retailers do to make sure they're meeting the needs of various consumer groups? Clearly, they're not going to meet everybody's needs, but to try to encompass as many people as possible.
So, healthy eating really is now deeply personal and to your point. So, it's shaped by the age, the lifestyle, the health goals, and even just emotional needs that consumers have. And retailers can respond by moving away from the one size fits all that you talked about, instead organizing around benefits, occasions, outcomes. I had the pleasure of presenting on Capitol Hill with a retail health initiative on Tuesday, and talked about, what if we started talking about the outcomes? What if we started talking about that? What happens if you eat these types of foods? What if you're trying to avoid or prevent a disease state? Um, what foods do you need to eat? What are those outcomes? So I think that clear navigation, the flexible filtering, both online and in store, inclusive messaging, kind of helping shoppers navigate their personal situation, and doing it in such a way that it is viewed as helpful, not intrusive. Granted, that's a balancing act, but I think it's one that retailers can do quite well.
So, no conversation in 2026, Sally, can happen without talking about economics. And eating healthy has always been viewed as a more expensive proposition than not. So, for the growing number of health minded consumers out there, how are they balancing higher price points for products that have more functional benefits, when their grocery budgets are under such pressure?
That's a really good question. And I would think that the answer is this: they're becoming more selective and strategic. So we've heard, consumers are more choiceful, they're more and selective, whatever word we want to use. But that means that we've seen some consumers trading down in brands and not necessarily the benefits. They might be not eating them or drinking them as often. It might be prioritization of products that deliver multiple outcomes versus not. But what it brings up is this opportunity around affordability. So we want all consumers to be the healthiest they can be. We don't want price to be a barrier. And so that means we need to find affordable options so that these trade-offs don't have to be made, and that it isn't just for those that have the means. It's for anyone that wants to be the healthiest version of themselves. And I think that piece of this, we see a lot of retailers leaning into this specifically, that they are trying to provide healthy meals, healthy solutions at different price tiers, so that no matter what economic situation you are living through, you can afford to be and eat the foods you need to be the healthiest form of yourself.